So welcome back, everybody, to Divorce Stories. I'm your host, divorce attorney Dennis Vetrano. We have a tremendous treat today. And listen, as I said with these guests that I've had lately, I have a series of qualifications to go through. So bear with me. I'm super excited to have Lisa Johnson and Chris Berry with us today, the founders of Been There, Got Out, which offers, and bear with me, which offers coaching and workshops for people in toxic relationships. They run a legal abuse support group. Lisa's a certified domestic violence advocate in her 7th year in the court system dealing with a toxic ex, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I'm not cheering about that.
Right. And she represented herself successfully on both trial and appellate court levels through scores of appearances, had her case published in Connecticut Law Journal this year to be used as legal precedent. Excellent. Her live testimony helped pass Jennifer's Law in Connecticut, the 3rd state in America to expand its legal definition of domestic violence to include coercive control. And we're going to talk about that later. She recently started the world's first legal abuse support group, which provides emotional support, expert guidance, and strategies for victims to strengthen their own cases. And Chris, not to leave you out, certified high conflict divorce coach and domestic violence survivor. And I think there's a whole lot we can talk about there, Chris. With a uniquely male perspective, his own high conflict divorce took 3 years and cost $300,000, where he eventually achieved a favorable outcome, preserving his role as a father to his 2 sons. And I know as a father, super, super important to be able to do that for sure. So Lisa and Chris, welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us. We enjoyed our interview of you, and it's glad to play on the back end of the Home and Home series here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's get right into it. So Been There, Got Out. Where does that name come from?
Yeah, that one was mostly me, but we were having a conversation about how when we were trying to think of a brand and a name and all that, and we're like, the most important thing is that we've experienced this. Right. You know, we both went through it. Right. So we were toying around with like been there, done that, all that.
The URL was taken.
Right.
But I think it's even catchier. I think we were just like brainstorming and throwing out ideas, and I blurted out "Been There, Got Out," and Lisa was like, "That's it."
Yes, and also the brand,
like
the
little logo. Yeah, where like it says BTGO and a square, and the O is getting out. It's like twisted.
Yeah, I love it.
So,
marketing. NBA.
Yeah, but that's, I think, again, what we're trying to do is get people to engage, right? And that's how you're going to help people, is to get them to engage. So anything catchy, anything that's, kind of a play on words, it really gets people engaged. So that's great. So
yeah, we kind of stepped in it, but it served us well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what led to the divorce? You've each been through the divorce process with toxic ex. What led to the divorce for each of you? And what was the process like for each of you? Who wants to go first?
You got to make sure you give us a time limit on that. What led to divorce? For me, I was in a 20-year relationship, married for nearly 18. I didn't know anything about narcissism or domestic violence. I just thought it was like physical abuse. And even though there was a little bit of that, I didn't think it really counted. We didn't really fight that much, but I basically, to make it a shorter story, I discovered he had been living a double life for years. I found out about an online affair, which opened up a whole other history, and decided the relationship was over. Took a couple of years to really plan my exit very, very carefully, because I have, we have 2 children, and my job, and, very rooted in the community. So I really wanted to make sure I did it right. But that's basically what led to it in a nutshell.
In my case, my ex actually left me. I don't know if I ever would have had the strength to, realize what was going on and get out myself.
Right.
What I talk about a lot with that is the trait of having resilience. Resilience is a wonderful thing to have, but in abundance or in excess, it can lead, like you can have the attitude of I can endure anything. I used to tell myself stuff like, this is when they say marriage is hard, this is what they meant,
Right.
And I was suffering. I didn't realize to what extent I was suffering, but she eventually left me. Thank goodness. It's the kindest thing she ever did for me. But as I said, my divorce took 3 years and cost $300,000, really for no good reason. It was just the fight. It was a stage that she got to perform on,
Yep. And I think, the message there is no matter what got you out, you got out. And I think you see much more clearly once you're out than when you're in it. So, so you guys define these as toxic relationships. can you describe or explain for our listeners what you mean by a toxic relationship?
Sure. So we always say, we're not, psychologists, we're not therapists, we're not like licensed to diagnose anyone.
Right.
So we use toxic as sort of a blanket label for people who exhibit the behaviors of like narcissism or borderline personality disorder and those things. There tends to be an imbalance in the relationship in terms of power and control.
Yep.
There can be financial abuse. Like I said, we focus on the behaviors,
right,
rather than trying to label someone with a psychological definition.
Yeah, and I think, and Lisa, and anything you wanted to add to that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's, also having or being a state certified domestic violence advocate, I was like, Chris, you got to print out this power and control wheel, which is often.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's often used with clients and also during our training. And it talks about the different types of power and control in what we always call a toxic relationship. So a lot of times, and we'll get into coercive control specifically, but it's, emotional abuse, economic abuse, which Chris noted as financial abuse, coercion, threats, minimizing, denying things, gaslight. I mean, it's a whole bunch of different behaviors, but generally, people don't seem to recognize when they're in an unhealthy relationship, but except if they're getting hit or physically harmed. And that's a big thing we need to educate people about. And
if your listeners want to see this power and control wheel, they can just Google it. Domestic violence power and control wheel. It's called the Duluth model for Duluth, Minnesota. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I have some TikTok videos on that.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and I have a link to the power control wheel, and that's one of the things I keep putting up, the power and control wheel, because the beginning trainings I took on domestic violence, that was the starting point.
Yep.
And it so opened my eyes as to things that I never knew, comprise domestic violence, and I think there's so much crossover there. So
Dennis, have you also seen the healthy relationships wheel? Because I remember seeing that and being like, wait, these exist? What is that?
Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. No, I haven't. And I think, do you know where my listeners can access that?
Same thing.
Okay.
Look
Excellent.
up Healthy Relationships Wheel.
Healthy Relationships Wheel, listeners. Definitely check that out. So
and all of our listeners, our clients, Dennis, have this, we call it the light bulb moment.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
When they realize like, oh my God, there's a reason for all this chaos and conflict and craziness in my life. It's got a name. I'm not the only one. These aren't unique problems. Like, oh my God. And it doesn't make it better, but at least you realize you're not alone. Right. There are things you can do.
And it usually happens like Chris said, a light bulb. I call it the epiphany, where it's like, you know where you were and what you were doing right at that time.
I can tell you, like, I think we're going to get to it.
Came up.
Yeah.
Right. And I think here's the thing, because what the abuser is going to say in that sort of circumstance is, you're crazy. This is all in your head. You're just making this up. And it just kind of helps perpetuate, the person that's as a victim in the situation, helps them perpetuate the idea that, oh, but this is okay. This is just what the relationship's supposed to be like. This is normalcy. And the reality is, when you look at that wheel, you know that it's not.
The techniques they use are very similar to what cults use.
Yes.
To keep their members in line and indoctrinate them.
And
this is normal.
Right.
This crazy.
And it's slow and insidious, and it's over time. And I'm sure you've heard of the term the frog in the pot, right?
Yep.
Have you heard that?
Yep.
I mean, some people don't like it, but it's so basically, if anyone doesn't know what it is, it's like, people say, how come you didn't know? Well, if you throw a frog into a pot of boiling water, of course it's going to jump out because it knows it's boiling. But for those of us in these abusive relationships, it's like you put a frog in a pot of tepid water and then you slowly turn up the heat. You don't even realize what's happening until you're burning.
Right. And neither of us, for the record, has tried boiling a frog, nor do we want to or recommend that your listeners do.
Right. Of course not. Yeah, I mean, insidious is the word that I've used before. Mm-hmm. So I love that word in describing that. So okay, so we got the wheel. From the two of your perspective, how do you know you're in it? And this is like the $1 million question, because I have so many clients or prospective clients or people out there, listeners, who are in it and they don't know that they're in it. How do you know you're in a toxic relationship?
Well, I mean, so that's a tough one. We developed a quiz that's on our website that was built off of like our own personal experience, plus what we learned as we educated ourselves about narcissism and some of the other issues, to make sure that it covered all the behaviors. But in my case, my first sign was I lost my center. It felt off. Something was wrong. My aha moment came 6 months after we separated. I had already met Lisa. I mean, so maybe it was even longer. Maybe it was more like 8 and 9 months.
No, we met it more than that.
Yeah. So it was a little bit longer. So I was in the first almost year into this crazy divorce.
Right.
And I didn't even know what was going on. Well, one of the traits that a lot of toxic people have is projection. You just talked about projection, right? You're the crazy one. They take their own traits and they say, you're like that.
Right.
So I knew she was like that. And she said I was a narcissist. And I Googled it. And I landed on a Wikipedia article that was my aha moment. I read the article, my jaw hit the floor. And it was like I was saying before, it has a name. Oh my God. She checked every single box. Right. So, but how do you know? Oh boy.
It's hard. I think a lot of people don't know until it gets unbearable. Something is just unbearable. I mean, for me, it was just like the lies and discovering something like more and more. And every promise that was made kept getting broken. And the big thing was, I wanted to keep the family together. I mean, like I said, we were together for 20 years, had 2 kids. I would do anything to keep the family together. And I think denial is a huge part of people in these situations. So it is really hard. People often contact us and say, my friend or my daughter or my son is in this really awful relationship. What can I do to make them see? And I'm like, it's very hard, to make someone see it. It's they just feel like they can't take it anymore. And that's when sometimes they seek help.
Right. Well, listen, I will tell you this, and I do have some background in dealing with domestic violence for many years and victims of domestic violence and some trainings on it. And I will tell you some of the pieces if not all of the pieces in your quiz are phenomenal. I mean,
thanks.
and if you don't mind, I'll read a few. Do you find yourself walking on eggshells to avoid setting your partner off?
Oh, yeah. That was a big one for me. I mean, I was constantly terrified that I'd push one of her buttons and it was like this little tiny thing would always turn into she's miserable and I'm the reason why. It would blow up. Right. And I would just constantly try to avoid triggering her.
And for me, I didn't have that. I didn't have that at all. So I had a completely different type of toxic relationship.
Right. Not everybody's going to say yes or positive to whatever question in the quiz. The quiz is long. It's like 33 questions. Mm-hmm. Right. And we find that most people who start it finish it, which is really something.
Right.
And with the quiz, what's interesting is when we first developed it, our businessy friends said it's too long, no one's going to sit through it. But we found that people, as they would take it, felt more and more validated, and they loved this. And it provokes a lot of conversations.
And I think you point out something really important. Don't think that your toxic relationship is going to fit one singular model with one set of criteria. There's going to be a lot of crossover. There are going to be some things that you don't see in your situation, but still a toxic relationship that somebody else is seeing in theirs.
Right.
And even
not everyone checks every box. And also toxic personality disorders, they're spectrum disorders. So you can have it a little or you can have it a lot.
Right.
Sliding scale.
And with narcissism, it's like there's the overt that's, really loud and obvious. Then there's the covert. And so I was dealing more with the covert. So the hidden.
Right.
The hidden stuff.
Now, if you don't mind me reading one more, and we just talked about this, does your partner project their own traits onto yours? And I think what happens with victims is the abuser will do something and the abuser will tell the victim that they do it. And rather than seeing it for what it is, say, hey, that's not me. That's actually them. They say, oh, it must be my fault. Accept responsibility to hold the family together, to keep the relationship together, and not seeing they're grafting the things they're doing onto the victim.
Yeah. I mean, Dennis, I don't know if this is common with you, but with us, we get a lot of people who are like, I think I might be the toxic one. I think I'm the narcissist. And we're like, the fact that you're even questioning yourself and concerned probably means it's not you. Nobody's perfect, but I don't think it's you.
100%. At least my experience in dealing with narcissists, and I can't say it as a specific diagnosis, but that personality type, let's say, would never even consider or go through that level of self-evaluation to say, hey, look at me. What am I doing wrong? Maybe it's me. They wouldn't do that.
No, because everything's working for them and everybody else is wrong.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So let me ask you a question. What's coercive control?
Okay. So, it's coercive control is interesting. And by the way, the UK has had coercive control as like a household term for years because their laws are part of it. And one of the ways they did it was, and I think this is fascinating, they did some soap operas that everybody watched that depicted coercively controlling relationships. And so everyone became familiar with it and they did an awesome job. They had experts really help write the script. But coercive control is not a singular incident. It's a range of behaviors. And according to this site called Women's Aid, which is like the site for the definition, it's a pattern of acts of assaults, threats, humiliation, intimidation, and other various types of abuse used to harm, punish, or frighten a victim. And the goal really, there's a couple of goals. So the goal is to make that person dependent on the other person. And the abuser will isolate the victim from support. They will deprive them of their independence. So coercive control is actually considered a liberty crime. And it's also a manner of regulating their everyday behavior. And usually somebody who is committing or using coercive control, they want to avoid conflict. So they'll basically just dominate in all these insidious ways. So financial abuse, like we said, emotional, verbal, psychological, sexual. There's something called revenge porn. Have you heard of that?
I have.
Okay, a lot of people. A friend of mine was like, "Oh, is that when afterward they get mad and if they're mad at you, they go watch porn?" I said, "No." Revenge porn is threatening or actually publishing sexual images of you to make you do what they want, like to either make you stay with them or to get back at you as part of a smear campaign. So it's a huge. Oh, and legal abuse. Duh.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And what's really important is anybody at all can fall into one of these relationships. It has nothing to do with your education, your professional success. I'm thinking of one of our clients who's a super highly successful corporate attorney. And she's amazing. She's such a professional powerhouse. But she fell into the relationship too. She was locked in her basement with the light bulbs removed and the windows boarded up. It's just incredible, how damaging these relationships are.
Mm-hmm. And they happen to the most independent, successful, responsible people. And that's why we blame ourselves. How could I have been so stupid? And
that's why they target you in the first place.
Right. Because I call you you're the shining star. They see you, wow, you've got this great appearance. An abuser's I want to be like that person. And then they get you and then they start degrading you because they resent you.
Now, if you've noticed, listeners, you didn't hear barely a peep out of me during that entire conversation there. And do you want to know why? Because I think the things that they had to say, the definition of coercive control is so, so important. I wanted you to hear every bit of that. So thank you for giving us that definition. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure my listeners do as well. So let's say you make that leap, you get there and you say, hey, now I'm really confident I'm in a toxic relationship. For the people I've dealt with, clients, listeners, people out there, how in the heck do you get started? Where do you begin to get out of that relationship?
Yeah. So do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I didn't know, again, I didn't know labels. I didn't know what I was dealing with. So I knew what I thought was, I know it's really bad, but I'm scared to tell anybody really that I didn't want to tell my family because I thought, again, if there's any chance of making this better. And if I tell them what he's done, they'll hate him forever and that'll be awful. So I only told a couple of friends. And like I said, I took about 2 years to really plan my exit. And so I just talked to friends. I got some bad advice, a lot of making excuses for his behavior and everybody really loves you, blah, blah, blah. But I think a good place to start is a domestic violence center, probably. Because we were looking I was trying all different things with different therapists, and nobody actually got it until the domestic violence center, until I touched someone there. And that was 1 year and 9 months after he was out of the house. And I forgot to mention stalking as a part of coercive control. That's when he was stalking our family. So they really, really get it. I would say those are the experts. It's free. They can point you to all kinds of resources.
Right. Right. And sort of I guess the answer to how you get out sort of depends on where you are in the process. If your clothes are on the lawn and your
Good
partner
point.
has taken the kids and gone to their parents, that you're kind of like forced out. But if you have the ability to get support, as Lisa was talking about, educate yourself and learn all about these behaviors, because that's not going to change them, but at least you can anticipate what's going to happen. And if you have the ability, if you're still in the home, still in the relationship, keep your cards close to your vest. Make sure you document everything, get copies of all, we have a whole checklist. There's 50 things on it, with financial records, because they're not going to comply with discovery. Once the process starts, they're going to resist and be problematic every step of the way.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the reason I'm also saying to contact a domestic violence center is there's something called safety planning. And that is the most important thing everyone needs to know. It's not just about your physical safety, but it's about, what I said, it's taking the time to make sure you get what you need before you physically get out. And we did a whole workshop on that's on our Sanity School on our site, but we interviewed a police officer who actually started the Special Victims Unit in the town of Greenwich, which became a statewide model. So he is you need to make sure you do things properly. You want to, if you do recordings and stuff, you need to have somebody there, all kinds of stuff that you would never normally think about.
Wow, that's a guy I'd like to talk to, guy or gal.
Oh, I can get in touch with him if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually thinking about putting together a piece and look out for this of just a basic how to get out of a domestic violence relation or domestic violence marriage survival kit. So the starting points, the nuts and bolts. Because a lot of times we think of the big issues, but we don't think of the nuts and bolts. Even just having emergency numbers in your phone.
Right.
Yep.
Friends and family that, hey, you're on the side of the road. You need somebody to help you. You're in an emergency. Just the basic numbers. But the starting point is to get educated, I think. And I think that's where you guys were starting. I think that's a really good suggestion, at least from my view of the world.
Right. And I want to mention something that with the safety planning that a lot of people don't think about is their pets. What do we do with the pets? A safety plan also includes pets.
Listen, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I have 2 German Shepherds, 2 horses, 2 donkeys, some chickens. So we have a hobby farm. So I'm super connected to my pets. So I would kill me for anybody to do anything mean to my pets. So you guys are both survivors of domestic, or rather toxic relationships. But Chris, I want to get a little bit more into your specific circumstance, because I'll tell you, as a divorce lawyer, I've seen thousands of domestic violence situations, relationships where it is the man's the abuser, the woman is the victim. But what I'm seeing more and more so now is the reverse. I'm starting to see more and more men coming in and they don't come in saying I'm in a domestic violence relationship. They come in to consult about a divorce case, and they're in it and they don't see it. So I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about your unique perspective on, look, how did you arrive at the conclusion, I'm in this? I mean, I know we went over it a little bit, but I think the male perspective is very unique here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important that people understand that this is not a gender specific problem. Right. It's not a social status specific problem. It's not economic, status problem. Yeah. It's global. Lisa and I work with anyone as long as they can speak English, all around the world. We had somebody in Switzerland we talked to yesterday. Mm-hmm. So I already talked about how I realized it was when she called me a narcissist, and I looked it up. Right. But I think from a male perspective, I think there's the appearance that it tends to be the male's the abuser more often. And it might be, slightly, might be 60-40 or something like that. But men are wired to be stoic. There's social pressure on us not to admit, hey, I'm an abuse victim. I mean, it doesn't show here on Zoom, but I'm 6'3". I weighed 240 pounds when I was in college. I played football. and my ex is like 5'4", and she's mastered like the doe-eyed innocent look. I go into a courtroom and claim abuse. Like, I'm going to be laughed at. So that's the male. Now there are biases against women in the system too, but from a male perspective, that sort of embarrassment and shame to admit that you were abused by somebody who's like tiny, especially for a big guy, it's not, it would be, that pressure's on men overall. And it's the same reason that we don't like to ask for directions when we're driving. It's like, I can do it. I'm a man, I'm strong. Yep. But we gotta, men in these situations, hopefully just like get help, just admit it. There's no shame in being the target. We don't like to use the word victim so much. We use the word target.
Okay.
They arrive in the door, they're victims, but we try to strip that label as quickly as possible.
Okay, fair enough. Let me say this. Guys out there, please listen to those words. Don't be ashamed. I think that's a big thing. And get help. Because I know that at least the males that I've dealt with that have been in that situation, those are the core problems. They're ashamed and they refuse to go out and get help. Just talk to a counselor. Just even start there. Just find somebody you trust to talk to, even just to get the ideas out there. But I think,
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I think the way the current is on social media right now, that women are the only ones who tell the truth, which is definitely not true. We have a number of male clients, and one of their biggest obstacles is saying, I feel like nobody believes me. I reached out to some of these people and they assumed because I was a man that I was lying, that I'm the abuser, and it's really harmful.
Right.
And one of the things, Dennis, that's been a very pleasant surprise for me and for us, as we started the legal abuse support group and as we started serving coaching clients, more of our clients are women than men. And more of the people in our legal abuse support group are women than men. But I have never, for all the women we've dealt with and helped, I've never felt like they were uncomfortable with the fact that I'm a man.
At first, I was like, Chris, I think you should be off camera when we started legal abuse support, because I'm like, you never know.
I would just sit in the background and only come on camera now and then to like make a comment, or I'd watch the chat. I was in more of a support role, but that's totally changed.
Right. And I think it's also really good. I think women appreciate that there's a man that cares this much, that also can provide his perspective. Plus, they see that there are men who are sensitive and kind and trustworthy.
Right. So we're not all bad. There was one bad one that you lucked into. Bad lucked into.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it also serves to further validate the advice that's being provided and the things that they're seeing on there and going through it. I mean, to have a man come in there and say, hey, I validate this, I support this. I think in many ways that helps. It's not just, ladies saying, hey, this is happening, but it's knowing that guys, like you said, are sensitive and knowledgeable and have the level of expertise out there to see it for what it is and assist in trying to help people get through it. So I think
I want to mention something, if that's okay, Dennis, on that. And so we have a guy that we met through our Instagram account who we've become good friends with, and he let us interview him. He's 6'7". He is a professional, and he is a survivor of severe physical abuse. And so I posted about 3 clips of him speaking about the trauma that he experienced with being terrified to sleep in his own bed even a year after she got out, how it affected him, how she would do it. She'd get in his face, she'd threaten, she would say, hit me, and then she threatened to slit his throat. And so those videos, we're still fairly new on TikTok, a little less than a month old, but those videos got so many views and so many people reaching out saying, wow, I've never seen anything like this. You can't even see that he's 6'7", but to hear a man speak openly about not just the emotional abuse, but the physical abuse that he endured. And I think there needs to be more men, overcoming the shame and talking about what it's like, because it helps more people come out of the woodwork. I feel like since I posted those videos, we've had a lot of men contacting us and saying, I saw the video. I know that you're going to believe me, that, even though I'm a man. So,
right. You want to encourage people to have the courage to step out and put it out there and ask for help and reach out and see it for what it is. I've actually, I've been doing this, handling contentious divorce cases and family law cases, thousands of cases for 20 plus years. I've had just recently the first to ever come out and say, and still didn't see it, and say, I'm physically abused. That's a first.
Wow.
Think about that.
That
has to have been, there's no way that didn't exist for the past 20 years.
No.
Right. Well, I don't know if I would have been able to do it, but I was, I'm an only child. I was raised by a single mom. So I have a lot of sort of more like what were viewed as feminine traits. Like I'm very introspective and I'm very comfortable talking about my feelings. But if I was raised like differently, I'd probably be uncomfortable talking about it, you know?
Right. Now you describe these relationships as toxic relationships. What's the difference between a toxic relationship, a domestic violence relationship, or being in a relationship with a narcissist, or is there a lot of crossover there?
No, it's the same. Same bucket.
It's like we said earlier, we use the word toxic because we don't want people thinking that we're offering a diagnosis. We're not mental health professionals.
Right.
We look at the behaviors. If they do X, Y, and Z, they're toxic. I don't care. I do know in my mind that person's a narcissist. They're probably a covert, or they might be an overt, whatever it is.
Right.
But, I know, but we just use toxic just to avoid anybody thinking that we're trying to diagnose when we're not qualified to do that.
Right. Got it.
But I always equate it with domestic abuse because there's so many different kinds.
Right. And I think we talked about this before during the Instagram Live. You don't need a label to know that these behaviors are, well, let's call it toxic marks of a toxic relationship.
Right.
Whether
You don't need a label.
Right. You don't need a diagnosis.
What you need is a plan.
Absolutely.
You need to come up with a plan for dealing with it. Right.
And also, often people will say, well, I need to know if this person is a narcissist or cluster B or borderline, whatever, like what, and so we try and say, know the basics, but let's focus on you and what you need. Like, let's take the energy off of figuring out all that. I mean, I myself wasted way too much time trying to make sense of it. Let's just focus on what you need and how we can get you there.
Right. And I'll have clients come in and say, hey, but I want them to know that they're a narcissist. But you're going to waste all this time and money and aggravation for an evaluation to make a diagnosis that may or may not be accurate and
doesn't matter anyway.
Right. Because that problem behavior is what's most relevant.
Right. Nobody's going to get custody because their spouse is labeled a narcissist.
Right.
And that's a myth. I think that's a big myth. People say, I'm going to pay $20,000 for the psych evaluation. They're going to see that person's a narcissist, and then I'm going to get full custody. And we're just like, it's not going to happen.
Right.
We've never seen it happen.
We did, in my case, that was part of the $300,000 was literally $20,000 for a psychological evaluation. The guy's office was up in your neck of the woods, so you probably know him.
Right. Probably. Right.
And we, I got to read hers. I got to read mine. And they were almost verbatim the same.
Right.
These people are master manipulators. They've been fooling people their entire lives, since adolescence at least. And they fool the evaluators. Right. They fool the judges. They fool everyone.
Yep. Yeah. And it's important to keep that in mind with these evaluations. When you have a master manipulator there, and maybe the evaluator and or the court doesn't have the time to sift through those things to make an official determination or diagnosis per se, are you wasting money and time and effort on that evaluation? So
we have never seen a case, and God bless anyone who's had success, but we've never seen a case where a psychological evaluation has made a positive impact. If anything, when they come back with a clean bill of health, the other side, the narcissist gets a normal evaluation, and it helps their case.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So now down to the nitty gritty. Can you give our listeners 3 tips for dealing with a toxic relationship? And you can only do 3.
3 tips dealing with it. Now, is this when they know they're in it or when they're out?
Well, I'll leave that up to you.
All right. So
can we do 3 each?
No, let's do.
Yes, of course. Of course. We'll allow that. I asked the judges that they said they'll allow that. So yeah.
All right.
Get support.
Well, wait. No, I want to start first. So because I have it before I forget. So I want to say, don't engage as much as possible, especially when you're out. Like the more you engage, I just put a post up about like know who's who at the zoo. Like you're feeding the monster. It doesn't matter that they're arguing with you. Like they love it. So you have to, and this is very, very hard. This is not like, oh, okay, I'll go gray rock. No, you have to learn how to do it. And it's like an addiction, and you have to learn to stop engaging and take all the emotions. So that's my one tip.
Okay.
Your turn.
Let's see. Get support. Get emotional support and educate yourself. Also, we mentioned that earlier, but if you can find a therapist who is trauma informed, not just any therapist, it's shocking how many therapists don't know what a personality disorder is, don't know about narcissism and borderline and those things, and aren't versed in how you recover from an abusive relationship. So get that help you need, because I remember so clearly in the spring of 2014, right before my marriage fell apart, I started seeing a therapist, and I had, because things had gotten so bad, I had this sense that I'd lost my center. I was like completely consumed, and everything, she had sucked every bit of energy out of me. And I went to see a therapist, and that's how I described it. I feel like I've lost my center. So get that support to get your, if you're going to be leaving and heading into the legal system, especially a custody battle, we always use the analogy of it's like going to war when you're already injured. So you got to heal yourself to go into, because you're going into the fight of your life.
Trauma-informed counselor. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have another one. I came up with 4 while he was talking. I love brainstorming.
We warned you, Dennis. We warned you.
That's okay.
Right. So another issue that happens with people is they keep repeating the cycle. They keep finding themselves in one relationship after another. And they're like, how does this keep happening to me? One thing they have to realize is when you come out of this relationship, you're vulnerable. And you're vulnerable to somebody who is another master manipulator. Because remember, these people also like to play the hero. And you have to be careful who you tell your story to. So when you go on a first date with somebody, if you're even dating that soon, like you got to be really, really careful. And this is a much bigger topic, but just know you are very, very vulnerable to getting involved because you're desperate.
And well, the same is true with your attorney. Right?
Yes,
when you hire an attorney,
yeah,
I'm going to stop after this one. Don't approach the attorney. And Dennis, I'm sure you've seen this. You're my savior. You're going to fix everything. I throw myself at your feet. No, your attorney works in a partnership with you. Mm-hmm. You need to have strategic oversight of your case, educate yourself, learn how to be a good client, so you don't end up with the 8 pages bill, at the end of the month, with like for every little email, because you're sending everything. You need to learn what's important and view it as a partnership. We did. You want to talk about the client as a consumer?
No. I'm like,
yeah, that's right. There is a clock involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that just the one piece with that, though, I think being engaged with your lawyer as a client and being an active participant, I think is super important for sure.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Absolutely.
One of the things we do, we always tell our clients these, it's your divorce is not going to be a normal divorce. It takes a team.
Yeah.
Right. I ended up spending $300,000, like I said, for no good reason. And if I had known, that's actually that we talked about where our name came from. The whole business came from a conversation that Lisa and I had, where I said to her, if I knew back then what I know now, I could have easily saved half of the $300,000, half of the 3 years just spinning our wheels in the legal system.
More.
At least, yeah. I mean, easily. And who knows how much like emotional anguish. I mean, I was terrified of that my role as a father was going to be diminished or destroyed. All that emotional suffering. I didn't have to, and that's what we try and do. Look, it's too late for me. I can't get that money back or that time back, but we can help our clients who are in the same situation who are just starting out.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll do one more tip it's like a 2-parter. So make sure you connect with people that really get it, that have walked the walk, or like have intense training like you do, who really, really understand what they're dealing with. But the caveat is, and this shocked me, but you have to understand that toxic people are throughout this healing community, preying on victims. So if you feel like something's off, even though this person is the head of a movement or this person is an esteemed expert, you need to know they are among us and they are studying behaviors of victims to, just like they're leaders of churches and cults and all kinds of things. Like, just trust your gut. Trust your gut.
Mm-hmm. In fact, we get inquiries like, what are your rates? I want to hire you. And Lisa and I we don't publish our rates. You can't hire us until you do what's called a discovery call. It's like an initial consultation you would do for a potential client. We want to know, we want to vet the person and make sure that, we're fighting for the good guys.
Right. And it's funny because at the end of my consults, I always say, look, if you decide we're a good fit, I'm a good fit for you, or our approach is a good fit for you, give us a call back. We'd love to work with you if I feel like it's a good fit for us. And on both sides, it's supposed to be. But with clients, when I give them advice, prospective clients, about how to choose a lawyer, the last and most important piece is you've got to feel comfortable with that person. Your gut, most times, is right. Mm-hmm. It'll tell you when you're in that office, you're sitting with that person, you'll know whether or not that's the right person for you 9 times out of 10. And do you make mistakes? Of course. It's not all, it's not one size.
Well, Lisa and I usually aren't in the same place when we do the discovery calls. And sometimes, it doesn't happen very often, but I'll get my phone and I'll text her, no, red flags, no.
Right.
I'll tell her I refuse to write this person a follow-up email. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Pursue your own
we have a
help.
safe word, but we're not going to say it.
So let me ask you this, and I added this just recently because I think it's a really important one based on all the things I'm seeing with what I'm doing. Do you have any advice for judges and lawyers who are dealing with this community? Because I will tell you, we are woefully in need of your advice as divorce coaches, people who've been in it, victims advocates. We need to hear from you. I don't think we hear from you enough. I think we do too much talking rather than listening sometimes. So if you could give me a piece of advice on how I could better serve this community, what would it be?
Well, I think the first thing is just recognize, if you can recognize as early as possible when a divorce is going to be a high conflict divorce.
Right.
And try and and adjust the strategies accordingly. So where my money went was in this endless cycle of negotiations and, we're this close to an agreement, so we're going to draw it up. And of course, you want your own attorney to be the one to draw it up, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Typically.
Always.
But so my attorney was drawing it up and drawing it up and drawing it up again and back and forth and back, and the goalposts kept moving.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And cha-ching.
Right. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Yeah.
Exactly. So to recognize that and just say, hey, this is not working. What finally got mine settled was we went to the brink. It was like a game of chicken. We went to the brink of trial.
Right.
And it was either you agree today or, we're scheduling the trial.
Yeah.
Right.
And I told my attorney, I said, there's no more back and forth.
Right.
We settle it now or that's it.
Okay, I have one, especially with my years in the court system and still going back in a couple of weeks and next month. I think that judges and everybody have to be very, very conscious of enforcement language that is built into any kind of order and agreement. There have to be severe consequences that are followed through.
Right.
If it says on a piece of paper that if the person doesn't obey, that they could be incarcerated, or they could face sanctions, but nothing ever happens, and we go on for 90 court appearances, what's happening to me is what happens to a lot of our clients. The abuser becomes emboldened by the system because they learn that if I can get away with it and keep wasting everyone's time and money and nothing happens, then I'm continuing the abuse, which is the opposite of what the court is for.
Right. I'm going to stop paying my share of medical.
Right. So
education. Nothing's going to happen.
Right. So my ex-husband has learned that because I have wonderful orders in 2 states, but because there's been no consequence to multiple counts of contempt, disobeying court orders, nothing happens. We can just keep. And in the meantime, I'm being financially blessed until, going pro se. But people shouldn't be forced to go pro se. Judges really need to look at the patterns of behavior over time, but they really have to enforce. They can't. An order means nothing without teeth. And that is my biggest battle lately is do something, just like a parent. If you don't discipline your child, the child keeps getting away with things, they're going to turn into an adult monster. with
Right.
no regard
Absolutely.
for rules. So that is what the courts teach people by bending over backwards, giving them way too many chances.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk in the sort of larger community that we operate in about family court reform, like advocacy, and this has got to change.
Yep.
It's sort of like kind of like the Me Too movement, but it's applying to family court. And everybody's screaming at the judges. Well, you know what? The judges aren't going to change. Okay.
Right.
But today's lawyers are tomorrow's judges, and today's law students are tomorrow's lawyers. It's going to take a generation, but it's about awareness at a very grassroots level, and having family lawyers who understand the dynamics of these situations and recognize legal abuse when it's happening.
Right.
Because then when they become judges, they'll be informed.
Right. So we have partners in Barbados, I'll call them out, Operation Safe Space, and they hired us and flew us out there, which was wonderful. And we trained,
That'll work.
It worked for us.
Yeah, we trained attorneys who were some were law students in what coercive control looked like, how, what this looks like, what to expect, how to approach them, how to support them, but to know like the reality of these are going to be those really difficult cases. And we also train domestic violence advocates because they don't have divorce coaches over there. So the domestic violence advocates here don't go through the legal system with their clients. There, they hopefully will. So they'll understand not just the therapeutic things that can help a client, but the reality of family court and the support that somebody needs as they go through the process.
Yeah, and I like the piece, orders mean nothing without teeth. Mm-hmm. And that goes for, listen, that's clients, that's lawyers, that's judges. You need to enforce these things.
And not just consequences, but clarity. Like, I mean, one of the things Lisa and I do is we'll help a client review the parenting plan. Right. And we'll do like a control F to search for the word reasonable. Yeah. Because the word reasonable doesn't go in there. It's got to be very clearly defined. Right. Because the devil's in the details, and these toxic people will just interpret things, any gray area, they'll take advantage of.
And I think one of the most important things you can do, listeners, and I think I've said this before, is once so let's say you work with your lawyer, you get your negotiated order or your after a trial order done. Step back, sit down, take a look at it, and talk to your lawyer about what's in it and what it means. Not just before the conference, not just during the case, after all the dust settles, because 9 times out of 10, you have so many emotions swirling around during the litigation of your case. You're thinking so much more clearly within the next 3 months, 6 months, year and a half after the case is done. And I think it's important to revisit the terms of the order so you ensure moving forward you clearly understand what each term means.
Right.
So, okay, so can you give me a favorite quote that you use with your clients? One each. This is one each.
Said favorite quote. I'm like, favorite quote. I mean, oh my God, I put quotes up every single day. My background is an English teacher. I love quotes.
I know, so do I. I love quotes, so that's why I like getting them from our listeners.
But we thought of a quote, but not for our clients, but in general, which I guess could be applied to our clients. But
that works.
So we had said something like a rising tide floats all boats. We feel like we all as professionals should work together to educate the community, to understand what's going on. We truly believe in collaborating with other experts and professionals so that we all share. Like sometimes people can get really competitive, but Chris and I are like, we love doing interviews. We love interviewing people that we're doing the same thing with, because the point is educating us so that we can go on with our lives.
Yeah,
a rising tide floats all boats. But I think that's very applicable to the people that we work with, for absolutely certain. Because without that, how would they have, how would you get that more support, that vindication, that assistance, all of that access to information? Without that, I keep saying victims. I know you guys categorize it as
targets. That's okay.
Everybody says victims.
But I think without that, where would that community be? So I think that's equally as applicable. Sure.
Right.
So Chris, what do you got for me?
This is another one. I don't really use it with clients, but it would absolutely apply. And it's kind of corny, but at the time when I was in high school, so I'm going to date myself. I graduated from high school in 1984, and I was a very big fan of Pat Benatar, the rock star.
Yeah.
And I especially almost have a man crush on him. Her guitarist and now husband of many years is a guy named Neil Giraldo. And I read in an interview when I was in high school, he used the quote, "Adversity builds character." And I think that absolutely applies. I mean, these people who are going into a divorce or separation from a toxic partner, or who are recognizing they're in a toxic relationship, it's going to be one of the worst things you ever go through. But you come out the other side and you're like, oh, I have my life. I mean, I'm happier now than I've ever been. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but Lisa and I aren't just business partners, but we've been a romantic couple for almost 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is the big reveal. Okay, yeah. That's good. I like it.
It's not obvious.
Admittedly, I already knew that, but now my listeners know too, though. That's great.
Yeah, but I mean, we could not, I wouldn't wish what I went through on my worst enemy. She went through it too. But I seriously wouldn't wish this on anyone. But when you go through it, you emerge the other side, on the other side stronger.
Right. It's funny.
Grateful, yes.
Grateful. Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I used to do a lot of updating my radio ads, and I did some radio spots about this. And part of it was, it was a concept that I got from basically writing a letter to yourself after you're out of the abusive relationship to yourself when you were in it. And it was basically just, so that people know, look in the mirror, realize you're worth it. You can do it. You will do it, and you'll get through it, and it will be better on the other side, sum and substance. So I think that's super important for people to hear, though, because I think many people who are in it feel hopeless. They feel like they can't even grasp what it would be like on the other side. It doesn't even enter the thought process.
Yeah. I mean, we'll say a lot of times on client calls, when we see they're very emotional, we'll say, "You're going to be okay."
Yeah.
And sometimes they cry when we say that.
No, often.
Yeah.
You're going to make me cry. I'm not even in it. So, it's important for them to have hope. So speaking of hope, the hope wall, please tell me about that. I think that's so awesome. Please tell me about it.
Okay. So I don't remember what post I had one day, like a while ago on Instagram, but somehow
it's a long time ago.
I know the issue came up of like, how is your life visibly different after getting out of a toxic relationship? So however the question came up, people started responding, and we asked them to make short videos, like 30 seconds to a minute, explaining how their lives were visibly different. Not just I feel better, but like what do other people see? Because I know for me, people are like, "You look so much younger." Yeah. Oh my God, like your skin is like, you look so much healthier. So we had people, and we keep meaning to like build the wall more, but we haven't, we've been doing other things. But we have people from all over, men and women, couples, talking about how their lives have visibly improved. So if anyone wants to go to beenthere.out.com and click on the hope wall, you can see it. Some are just audio recordings, a lot of people talking.
Yeah, there are one or two that are even just text. But the idea is to inspire people who might be stuck in a horrible situation that it can be better.
Right.
Right. That's excellent. I love that. And speaking of hope, you both got out and now you're together. So, and flourishing together. So speaking of hope, that's what's possible, I think. And it's important that people see, when you may feel hopeless in it, there is hope beyond getting out. And once you get out on the other side, there is also hope for new love, new relationship. No?
Yeah. When you least expect it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they don't want, most of our clients don't want to hear about that.
They really don't. We put blogs up once, they were like, "Stop."
Yeah, but I think I will tell you, in the divorce process, that's one of the most frequent questions I get. And I don't know, what category the person is in, those particular people who ask about it, but many people ask, when can I start dating again? That's one of the first questions. Mm-hmm. And then I think the corollary to that is like, how? But that's for a whole nother.
But that's the fun stuff that we haven't focused on. But we talk about writing dating profiles, and it's a lot of fun.
So you see, for me, like, I'm fascinated by my work and what I do and how I can help and protect and do what I can for people in a whole host of different circumstances. And I love talking about relationships because I think there's a connection there, and maybe you're not in the right relationship now, but maybe after you get out, you find the right one. So why don't you tell our listeners what you're doing right now, where they can find you, where can they find the quiz, where can they find the Hope Wall? If they wanted to work with you folks, what would be involved? How could they do that? Give us the whole thing.
We're going to do it fast because we have a client in 4 minutes.
Okay, perfect. You got 4 minutes. Perfect. 4 minutes, right? That's perfect.
Yes. Okay. So our website is beentheregotout.com. On Instagram, we're at beentheregotout with little underscores, like been_there_got_out. And on TikTok, the same thing. People email us. It's really easy. Lisa@beentheregotout.com or Chris@beentheregotout.com. We have a weekly legal abuse support group that is drop-in. If you go to our site and click the bottom button on the homepage, it shows you details about what legal abuse is. I'm sure you'll connect to it. Anybody who sees it, because it's like, here's some examples. And then it has registration information. It's like a drop-in, like I said, so you don't have to sign up for multiple sessions. So you come when you need, if you like it, if it's helpful. The meetings tend to go an hour and a half at noon Eastern time on Sundays. And then we also have coaching clients, but like we said before, we screen everybody to make sure it's a good fit. So if someone's interested in getting a free, we call it a discovery call, they can also go to beentheregotout.com and click that top button, and that'll take them to our calendar. And then schedule a session. And then we have workshops on our site that we don't pay that much attention to these days because most people want to do live interaction. We have free content galore on Instagram and TikTok. We have the blogs. We have to do more of the blogs.
And the quiz. You asked about the quiz.
The quiz is on the
right
site.
On the menu at the top of the homepage.
Right. And we do lots of, I love doing interviews. So we do lots of lives like this podcast, and we do our Instagram lives. I'm going to do my first TikTok live tonight about parenting plans. So we're always happy. Like we said, rising tide floats all boats. Like do a series, just keep talking and getting it out there.
And the Hope Wall's on the website as well?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right at the bar, you can see Wall of Hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lisa and Chris. It was so awesome to have you here. I think this went really well. You got to make me a promise, though, before you leave. You're going to come back again? We're going to talk again?
Of course.
Absolutely.
And then you come back to us, too.
Absolutely.
I want to see pet donkeys one day. Pet donkeys?
Absolutely. They're the most lovable creatures on the planet. So Thanks again, Lisa and Chris. Be well. Good to talk to you. And for all of my listeners, thank you again for tuning in to Divorce Stories. We'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.